Iliana Regan is a talented self-taught visionary in the culinary realm. She's the chef and owner of the Michelin-starred restaurant Elizabeth in Chicago, as well as the secluded bed and breakfast retreat Milkweed Inn, located in the leafy landscape of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Regan's new memoir, Burn the Place, focuses on her early childhood, struggles with addiction, and rising career as a fine dining chef. Of her many achievements is Elizabeth, a 20-seat fine dining restaurant named after Regan's eldest sister. The cuisine highlights the deep-rooted flavors of mostly plant-based Midwestern fare and the farm-to-table mentality, a tradition that has long fixated on in-season items and local sustainable sourcing. This focus on natural ingredients and flavors circles back to Regan's upbringing in the flat rural farmlands of Indiana. Her parents would often forage for fresh mushrooms and roots in the prairies and grow a backyard garden where, in the summertime, fresh fruit and produce would be in high supply. Reminiscing on her formative years, Regan had several fond memories of her mother creating something delicious with just a few simple ingredients.
She'd get out a skillet and a little propane burner, and she would prepare like hot butter right in that skillet, and then she'd just lightly dust the fresh zucchini and flour and salt and pepper and then butter fry it, and that was one of my favorite things. But we would make the mushrooms that we'd forage. She'd can tomatoes, canned peaches. We'd make apple cider in the fall. Just really good home-cooked meals, which when I had friends over, they really, really loved. Sometimes it wasn't always my favorite. It was fun to go to other kids' houses and have like rice-a-roni from a box and stuff like that I wasn't used to.
Craving to meet different people and experience new places, she moved away from rural life and enrolled in college to study chemical engineering. However, by her early 20s, she was drinking too much and felt lost in her degree. In the end, she gravitated towards what she had always loved most: food.
I was really just kind of doing whatever I could, and I loved cooking. So I loved being in that environment. I loved cooking. I loved eating. And so I was at the same time kind of getting my own informal education that way and just taking whatever positions I could get or whatever was going to pay me more so that I could live, because I had been living on my own since I was 18, or rather like closer to 19. So it just kind of ended up being its own education. And yeah, I had worked in a lot of different cuisines, a lot of different styles of restaurants, everything from kind of more casual fast service all the way to extremely fine dining, and being a manager at some places in the front, and even learning about wines while I was at Alinea and Trio.
But with her foray into the restaurant and fine dining niche came the ugly underbelly of drug and alcohol abuse that encompassed her 20s.
I knew I was an alcoholic from the very start, so it wasn't hard for me to get to some low points, whether it was from doing a lot of drugs or ending up in jail, where I was like, okay, something's definitely wrong. And occasionally visiting AA over the years in attempts to get sober. But as you grow more into adulthood, at least for me, there was more regret, more guilt, more feeling remorse for how I acted the night before, more of it getting worse and escalating to the point where I was doing things that I really didn't want to do.
Alcoholism runs in Regan's family, and the hectic, disjointed lifestyle of a chef, mixed with some ill-fated associations, only fueled her deep-rooted addictions.
The restaurant industry does foster that kind of behavior because there's a little bit later hours, and oftentimes you're around a lot of alcohol, and there's a lot of ways that you can just skate by in that industry, make some pretty good money, and really do a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol. And so, it's definitely an issue and runs rampant.
Regan herself was a functioning alcoholic who, despite the heavy drinking, could still maintain her career and make herself look put together. Regan says that under the surface, however, she was anything but.
From the outside, I was actually getting a promotion at the job I was at. So from the outside, everything was looking fine. But on the inside, I was definitely falling apart. And I knew all those things were kind of hanging by a thread. And so after one night of heavy drinking, I just was like what kept going through my head as I was feeling so much remorse was that, okay, you never have to feel this way again. And that line from AA, and I was like, yeah, I don't ever want to feel this way again. And so the next day I went to AA, and I've stayed sober ever since.
Now, Regan has been sober for more than a decade. She's married to her wife, Iliana Regan, who's a prominent sommelier in Chicago and helps with the restaurant operations and culinary menus, including wine pairings. Today, the restaurant industry is still reeling from the effects of the years-long COVID-19 pandemic, but things are getting back to a more normal pace month after month. However, inflation and labor shortages are still some factors that are feeding into continued challenges for many entrepreneurs and chefs like Regan.
The economy ebbs and flows, and there's a lot of competition, and so, there might be nights where we might only have 10 reservations, but our restaurant depends on having every seat full and people buying wine, and so I can pay the staff and make sure I pay the bills, because it's not about just getting good reviews, and you can't rest on your laurels in that kind of way, like, oh, we got a great review by the Chicago Tribune, we're good now. Like, no, we have to keep innovating, we have to keep changing, we have to keep pushing, we have to keep doing different things with our guests.
This demanding cycle does lead to burnout for many chefs and restaurateurs, so sometimes pausing for a period of introspection can be much needed. For Regan, writing her memoir, Burn the Place, created that opening for a new chapter in her life.
Burn the Place to me was also a metaphor for really just picking up things and changing, and that's sort of where I end up leaving off in my book is there's going to be something next, and it's not quite what we've been doing before, because shortly after I started writing the book, or maybe even beforehand, I was already feeling the burnout, and I had been open 3 years, but again, that way that I work and the amount of work that I do as a small business owner really can drain you. And there was a restaurant opening and closure at that time, and then another one, and I was starting to feel extremely depressed, extremely burnt out, really tired, not wanting to go to work, not wanting to come home. And so a lot of that was happening actually as I was writing the book in the beginning, and I was really started to think what can I do next? Really I have to change what I'm doing because I want to be happy. And there's nothing that is, aside from creating the food and stuff like that, there's really nothing that's extremely fulfilling, and I want balance in my life, and we want to have a family.
As Regan looks ahead, she says it's more about balance, health, and hopefully one day growing a family with Iliana.
For me, I want to have a happy relationship and home. I want to try to have a family in whatever capacity, whether it's me trying myself or us adopting or whatever the case may be. And, obviously having my restaurants and having the success, but having it in a balanced way, which might eventually mean letting go of Elizabeth and working towards another goal, like how can we do all of this in the industry that we both love and we're kind of meant for, but do it in a capacity that's actually really suitable to a real healthy lifestyle.
To find out more about Iliana Regan, her career, and current ventures, visit viewpointsradio.org. Also check out her memoir, Burn the Place, available at bookstores and on Amazon. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri and originally aired in May of 2020. I'm Gary Price. Coming up on Viewpoints.
Without them, there is no accessibility, there's no availability, there is no programming, there are no seats available, and families will continue to struggle.
Highlighting the undervalued workers in early child care. Then,
we can't solve poverty if companies like H&M are only paying half of what families need, workers need, to house, clothe, and feed their families.
The fight for fair wages in the fashion industry. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.